We've heard from a number of people that are interested in this sort of data sharing between our tools, such as the database or ServiceNow, those types of things, into their CRM solutions. Most people are using Salesforce. There is Dynamics 365 involved as well. And for the most part, we have an API that's available for you guys to be able to connect different tools together. And that's kind of the approach that we have taken, is to give you guys access to the API and help you navigate that. So we're just kind of looking at, what are you guys trying to do? How's it working? What are some solutions you've tried? What are you using it for? Why is it important? And then anything else you can think of. And feel free to jump in at any point. David, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add here now before we hand it off, or pretty much sets the scene.
No, I think you did a great job there, Corey. Thank you. I think the only other thing that I'd add is I don't think we necessarily need to limit this conversation to CRMs. We're framing it around that just because that's something that's come up more than once, and it's at least somewhat generalizable across many of our customers. On the technical side, a lot of the networks are sufficiently different that it's sort of a little bit harder to talk about things like data synchronization, stuff like that, in a meaningful way. Yeah, so don't feel limited. If there's other kinds of tools and integrations that you want to talk about, then we can do that. So yeah, like Corey said, some starter questions. Like what are your goals here? Like, what are the drivers? What approaches have you tried? Like, did they work out? What barriers did you feel were sort of, getting in the way of that? Yeah, and all of that. And I will happily call out, we've got a few specific people who've expressed an interest in the past. So unless somebody wants to jump in, I will happily call out an individual to get us started.
Wendy, I see you on camera there. I don't know if you want to jump in. You're the one we've been talking to the most recent.
Sure, I don't mind. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Wendy Rico from CEN, the Connecticut Education Network. I'm the member relations specialist over here. And we've been working for a couple of years now on a project to consolidate and connect our 3 databases. We have Constant Contact, we have GlobalNOC, Salesforce. So we've been putting an effort in to combine and connect all 3 databases. CEN uses the CRM Salesforce to track our contacts and communications with our current members, and for sales, and create orders. We use those orders for billing, so we use the Salesforce quite a bit. And we recently shifted from sending communications out of Constant Contact to sending them out of Pardot, which is a module that connects to Salesforce. So that was the first step, and we're just finishing that part up. But in parallel, we also are making an effort to prepare our GlobalNOC data and our Salesforce data to match up so that we can do a connection between those 2 databases with the goal of having it automatically sync overnight on a daily basis. And like many of you, we have contact info in so many different places, and it gets very cumbersome to constantly be updating all these different databases. So what we're trying to, we're in the process, we still haven't moved forward, but we've been in conversations with GlobalNOC to use a product that we've discovered called Balance, and that's it's www.balance.app, VALENCE.app. And this Balance is a managed application written specifically within Salesforce using Apex code. And once it's installed, we hope to connect Salesforce directly to GlobalNOC. So 2 of the 3 components, basically the connection into Salesforce data will be the first step. and then the engine to handle the transfer over and back for the information will be the next step. So we hope to use this product through a contractor that we happen to know the person who wrote the code, and we've dealt with them before. So we're really excited about getting this completed and not having to use multiple databases in the end.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned there that I think is maybe worth talking about more is you said you've been trying to sync up the data in the database so that it matches. So are you guys trying to get both sides to match first and then try to sync, or are you trying, are they both basically, I guess, authoritative sources right now and competing with each other?
Right. They're not, since they're not connected, we may have some technicians who update on the technical side, and then we have the admin staff who updates on the Salesforce side, and totally different information. So we're going through taking that time to do the cleanup before we actually do the sync. We hope to have the GlobalNOC be the authoritative side at one point, in the end, so that, before we start wiping out the Salesforce data with the authoritative GlobalNOC data, we want to clean it up as much as we can. We also keep track of account information, such as account numbers, account types, and roles, and what kind of vertical they are, such as, a public K-12, a private K-12, higher ed, that kind of thing. So there's not just contact information, there's other information that we're planning to sync up as well. So we're really excited about using this product. We just have to go through the process of doing the work. Hopefully next year at this time, we'll have something to report.
I have a question, Wendy, which is sort of how did you end up with like the multiple diverged data sources? Like which one came first? And were there did the DB come first? Did Salesforce come first? And what things did you try? I mean, I totally understand just sort of how those would diverge, but like, was it something where you tried to keep things synchronized automatically? Sorry, did you try and keep things synchronized manually, or did you sort of like starting out think it was going to be inevitable that they'd diverge?
We were hoping that we wouldn't have to maintain so many databases, but all of them have different functions. Unfortunately, at one point we were like, well, can we just do all GlobalNOC and not deal with Salesforce? But then we started using Salesforce for so many different things. We realized we definitely needed Salesforce, and then we were like, okay, let's get rid of constant contact, because we could send communications out through this Pardot, which is part of Salesforce. So okay, we've got rid of constant contact, but when that happened, which has just happened a few months ago, it created a ton of work on the cleanup side, because it created all kinds of duplications for the coming in. So having gone through that, we want to be even more prepared when we do this sync with GlobalNOC and Salesforce, because there's going to be a lot of duplication and slight things that might be slightly off. Southern Connecticut State University in one database, SCSU in another database. It doesn't know that it's the same, so a little manual work has to be done in there. But we really tried. We have wonderful grad students that work on our databases, and they try to maintain, if a new person has a change, that they put it in all the databases. But you just, you're going to get somebody on the fly that says, oh, okay, let me do this real quick, and they don't realize you really have to update it in 3 places. So it's quite difficult.
Are there others that are in a similar situation to CEN?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing too, is we talked to another one of the regional networks, because they had connected Salesforce to GlobalNOC. They hired their own folks to make the connection. I think it was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna throw them under the bus first because they did a demo for us and it wowed our people so much that's exactly, they went to the use case where they're integrating with their E-rate databases and things like that, and had our E-rate people going, that's what I want. That's what I want.
Oh,
So
we
now
haven't even gone down that road.
So now I'm screwed because one that did such a good job. I think Brian's on, right? Yeah.
I was gonna call out Brian. I think I saw you on earlier.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, we hired a group out of Texas to help us with integration, and we keep ours separate actually. So we pull all of that E-rate data into Salesforce, but we don't only serve about half the K-12s in Oklahoma, so we don't want all of that in our main operational database. So we've got some Ajax code that basically just uses the GRNOC API to pull we want all the GRNOC data into Salesforce, and then all of our salesy kind of data in Salesforce. And then basically, if we've got a primary key from GRNOC, we know that's where it came from. And we still have some of those issues where, okay, now they're a customer, but we call them something different. So we have some, where we have to reconcile that. But it's manageable. It's not perfect, but it is manageable.
And then do you sync for on a periodic basis from GlobalNOC DB back into Salesforce, or?
Yeah, we have an overnight process just running on a schedule.
Okay.
It runs kind of slow because it hits the services. We pull all of our services in as well, and that's kind of a slow API, but it works. And once a day is enough for us for what we're doing.
So Brian, maybe it'd be interesting for other people to hear sort of what that process of integration looked like from your side. So not necessarily the super technical details, but how did you identify the people to do the work? What help did you need from us? Just sort of those kinds of things. And sort of qualitatively, was this a lot of work? Was this straightforward? Any challenges that you ran into?
Yeah, that's a good question. So GRNOC gave us some help, but really most of the help from GRNOC came earlier on in teaching us how to use the API. So then we taught the consultants that we hired, and actually we got them from Salesforce. So when we decided we were going to go Salesforce, these group of consultants are the ones that stood it up for us originally, because they kind of recommend that you have some expertise in organizing your Salesforce organization. So that's who we used. And they had a good team. It did cost us a fair amount of money to develop that Ajax, just in man hours. I don't know what that was, but I think we shared that with CEN, and we're happy. We checked with them. We paid for it, so we own it, and we're happy to share that out. And maybe out to GRNOC would be a good place for them to take it and divvy it out as they want.
Yeah, we're kind of set on using this balance product, which is supposed to be very simple to use and just connect back to the API that GlobalNOC has. So we'll see. We'll let you know how simple it is.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a better solution if you can get something that ties those two together.
I believe it's $12,000, however, but then you can use it for up to 5 instances for what you're connecting to Salesforce. So if we wanted to connect core to Salesforce, we could use it for that. So they're, I think, hoping that GlobalNOC could purchase it and sell it to 5 of their RDs. We'll see about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've kind of run into is that GlobalNOC is more flexible than Salesforce is in having one contact being on multiple accounts. So we had to build some custom objects to kind of kludge that in so that we didn't want to lose the many-to-many relationship on users and accounts. So we kind of had to, it's not perfect, but we definitely didn't want to have to duplicate all of our accounts to make Salesforce happy.
So to be clear for both Wendy and Brian, your, let's call it authoritative or source of truth for the member database, right? The number, the contacts at the member, is that, are you both pointing to GlobalNOC for that source of truth in the GlobalNOC DB?
We are.
And then that will be pushed to Salesforce.
Yeah, that's how we work.
That's how we plan to do it.
Yeah, and we have many discussions on that point around which one should or could be picked.
I'm happy to hear that, and you know, we haven't made that determination yet, and we're having the discussion. We're in a knockdown, drag out battle between Dynamics and Salesforce, right? And we're very heavily invested in our Microsoft tools, and we may default in that area. But I'm very interested in the authoritative source of truth for the member database, because I believe that will then allow us to extend other services on top of the contact name, like trust identity, you know, rights and privileges and things like that, if we have it all in one place. Plus, and I don't know, maybe Luke or Dave, you could say this. Do you have a process where we could put that sort of one form together that says update contact database XYZ, and here are the fields to either say, you know, click or not, so that we have one place to do all that in?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mean something their users can come into and update their contact details?
Exactly. And or any one of our people. No, we have three, like Wendy said, we've got three databases, because ours are, you know, obviously the DB, but we also have our financial system, which has its own DB. And then we have our marketing DB that's actually embedded in our web database. And that's what we want to consolidate. And so I want to have one way to input those different types of contacts.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of, you know, it, like you say, it sort of depends on what you decide your source of truth is. You know, if your source of truth is GlobalNOC DB, you can obviously use the GlobalNOC DB UI to input those. And one of the things we're looking at doing is we've got a contact update tool that is sort of a user self-service to update contacts that hasn't been you know, redone in a while. It's sort of old technology, and we're looking to integrate that this year somehow into our portals. So that might be something to look at. Is we could provide potentially a widget that your users could integrate either into a portal we run or a portal you run to then go back into GlobalNOC DB and push those details in.
And then you'll get back to notifications where you can notify people to update their database.
There you go.
Never
yeah, the contact update tool, just to, you know, be a little bit more expensive about what it is. So like that's focused on, you know, administrators at your organizations typically. So that's something where, you know, a central contact, you know, gets to verify all of that information. So I think doing something where individual people can do that would be super useful, and doesn't sound super hard.
That sounds.
I mean, we definitely need some kind of validation there, but I think that there's ways that we can do that.
Highly desirable to get that higher on the to-do list.
Yeah, it'd be great if you had it all done before we choose, you know, who we wanted.
You're lucky. We've got not only this session you can advocate for that, but Dan's talking about portals later today, and you can give him the same feedback then.
Yeah.
It
all melts together. It's all the same subject, right? It's all, you know, that's why we turn out. That's why I'm you know, we started with, you know, your AAA service, right? And then we use that, and now we're putting multi-factor authentication. We're doing all this. Well, by definition, we should ultimately have that be the source. I mean, to me, anyways.
And as we look at, you know, adding right functionality into our portals, that one was an obvious one that is just, you know, fairly simple and pretty valuable. I think.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're looking at Salesforce to see what's available, you know, just keeping our eyes open to see what's available on the member portal side, on the Salesforce side, but really it makes more sense because, you know, GlobalNOC is going to be the authoritative source for it to come from the GlobalNOC side. So.
Brian mentioned that you guys have some that are in Salesforce that are not in the DB, because those are maybe contacts that you're just pulling from like E-rate that you guys maybe haven't won the E-rate on. When there going to be some that you guys at CEN have to maybe input into Salesforce that you don't want in the DB, or are you just going to always put it into the DB?
We've thought about that too. We're definitely going to have what we would call administrative or executive contacts on the Salesforce side that totally do not need to go into the GlobalNOC database. So, you know, I'm interested to see how that's going to work with the transfer. Maybe there's an indication that we need to do, like I said, that you know, okay, these don't go back into GlobalNOC. I would like to know how many other folks have Salesforce that are on the GlobalNOC.
We could do a straw poll, hit the reaction button at the bottom and raise your hand or do a thumbs up if you're using Salesforce today. So I see one that.
I was gonna say people are gonna have to scroll back and forth. We've got 2 screens of people.
Yeah.
I saw a couple people from OneNet raise their thumbs up. There's Wendy's.
I believe Internet 2 uses Salesforce too.
Yeah, there's a back office system, but there isn't any real strong integrations. But it's definitely something that we've been wanting to do with the folks that work that, not only from a contact perspective in the database, but also for ticketing, so that people can see recent incidents, that sort of thing.
Are you thinking like a one-stop shop, like you pull up a client inside of Salesforce and it maybe shows like a history of their tickets or something?
Yeah, that's. I mean, we haven't really gone down the path of really strictly defining what that looks like, but that's the sort of thing that's been brought up in prior conversations.
Yeah, we have a lot of goals to, you know, like I mentioned, the member portal in the future, but also invoicing out of Salesforce. But you know, that'll probably not come until next year.
So it seems like we've got a couple of people in different stages. You know, OneNet's done it and been doing it for a little while. CEN's pretty well through the process and getting to the point where they're going to start doing the data. And Ocean, you guys mentioned that you're still determining between Salesforce and Dynamics. I don't know, Brian, if you want to, can you talk about like how long it took? Like how like if someone wanted to try to do this today, one of these other networks that hasn't started this transition or that might be considering Salesforce, how long did it take to really get to a point where you guys were comfortable with the data transfer?
I'm trying to remember, it's been a while ago, but I would say around 6 months. There was a lot of back and forth, and we were kind of doing multiple projects at once because we kind of tackled the GlobalNOC integration along with the USAC stuff and building quotes and all that kind of stuff all in as one big project. But if you're just looking at pulling data in, maybe 3 to 6 months, something like that. And we don't have a two-way integration. That's one thing that's kind of, especially where we have trouble with people deleting records. And now you just have a dangly out there in Salesforce that never gets updated. But that's more of an operational thing that we've got to get people trained to decom people and not just update a name or delete a contact, that kind of thing.
It's an important point in question about framing what it means, how, you know, to get comfortable or to get to a certain point is I've been advocating to setting the bar really low to actually just have a place for the authoritative DB and have that socialization happen and make sure that happens. So, but that's very different than having a workflow that takes our provisioning from opportunity all the way to a full provision, where it starts in, say, the CRM area and is tracked all the way into the service now, you know, provisioning ticket, right? Which is a workflow that'll be down the road that we certainly want to get to, but we're not there, right? Start low.
We're not either.
That I mean, there's still a disconnect. Ambitious, yeah. I wish we had even thought about that, but that sounds ambitious. That would be awesome.
As we talk about things like two-way synchronization and things like that. One of the challenges I think we struggle with, even in just using the database as the authoritative source, is that not everybody understands the implications of making changes to the database and how that propagates into the tooling. And I mean, just to use the example of notifications, our notification tool identifies a certain subset of the contacts based on the contact type. And those are the only people that get notifications. So if somebody were to go in and modify that notification type and call it an executive contact as opposed to a primary contact, well, then that person all of a sudden doesn't get notifications. And that's just something you have to know. And as you start to divorce yourself from that interface and pulling more people in that aren't necessarily familiar with it, if you are doing some of that two-way synchronization, just as a general observation, you have to be very careful about how that gets presented and how impactful that can be. And it's similar with tickets in that a lot of the things that we put in tickets are important from a QBR perspective and tracking statistics. So making modifications that push that into the ticketing system, again, you run into those kind of considerations. So just as people are thinking through that, it just makes that problem a little bit, it widens the surface area of an existing problem.
Well, and you're speaking to the language of the, let's call it, two sides of the organization, right? So somebody like myself or the member services side of things, when they go into and look at ServiceNow, and even if they look at a ticket, even the way it's structured now, you know, no disrespect to engineers, but you guys talk about like IP addresses and VLAN tags and right, and we're sitting there saying, well, I don't know who the member is that is affected by this ticket. I just read the entire thing and I don't even know if it's, you know, Brown University, right? So because of the language of the two sides of the house, you have to be careful and make sure that certain things are required fill-ins to get the kind of reporting that you might want to see in a CRM push.
Dave, yeah, I'm impressed that you go into ServiceNow and check out tickets. That's awesome.
I do. I'm awesome. I don't know what I'm looking at, but I look.
the determination of in that particular case of who do you associate a particular issue with, sometimes it's really cut and dry because you've got a request for a problem from a particular organization. It's really clear, like, this is just affecting Harvard, but then there are a lot of things that come in that are just
multiple,
much more blurry than that, and that's a trick. I don't have a good answer to that one.
We have done some effort specifically for you, Dave, on affected customers is what we call it in the ServiceNow side, but it's really being populated based on who's affected on a given outage or change. And it's a related table that we built for you guys to be able to get that association of entity affected by incident or by change.
It's
not perfect.
It's the and you're probably getting it from my engineers who hear me complain that I look at my DDoS mitigation screen and I've got 8 members in DDoS mitigation. I have no idea who they are. Right, because it doesn't get, it might get populated in a particular dashboard at your side, but to be populated into the portal that I look at, it doesn't.
Sure, that's yet another data source or many that the portal's pulling from. Right.
Yep. I think the spawn of that actually was your report that you had where you listed the number of outages per entity when you were doing your comparisons there.
Yeah.
That was kind of the spawn of that whole conversation. Because it is important to be able to look at that and in plain English tell someone what's happening.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about CRM, we're going to be wanting to use the CRMs for more business-oriented reportings and things like that. And in order to do that, we better make sure that we've got the fields that they're grepping from, right? So it's a very, very important subject going forward.
And Dave, I'll echo even with what we're going to partially help present on at 2:00 around our service status dashboard. Some of these things you need a secret decoder ring because you don't know what is actually being said, because our nomenclature for how we refer to a site doesn't necessarily translate really well to who the actual member name is. It's you for us, you must have memorized the town codes, the town tax codes in Connecticut, and then you'll know where that is. So once you have the decoder ring, you can figure it out, but it's not obvious to most people at first glance.
Hey, Ryan, do you guys have a decoder ring on your website that
No.
indicates? So that's what I ended up doing is we have a cheat sheet of this pop code equals this.
There's permutations in that yeah, it's worth a one pager as to here's how these things are numbered. Here's what it really means. The interesting thing is that it was devised like 20 years ago, and there's been some variances introduced where I would say what used to be really applicable 15 years ago, you would never rename it that, like if you just started over. Because to call everything EN meaning EdNet,
That makes no sense now.
Right, makes no sense anymore. At the time, it made perfect sense.
Right.
Now, not so much. But yeah, it's that could be a helpful add-on. Like here's your decoder ring.
Yeah, I can share the link we put on the iLight website for you.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd just take a moment to say, I think it is, one of the things that really is important as you're planning these integrations is, what is your kind of master data source and for what scope, right? So I had to do the same kind of thing that you're all looking at whenever, but I had to do it for all of us, right? Whenever we were talking about, all right, let's get our DB data synchronized with data in ServiceNow, right? And we ran into some of the same things that Brian did, so that tells me that you guys will run into them too, where you've got kind of contacts. They can be in the DB, they can be homed in multiple entities. That doesn't necessarily happen in other tooling. Like it wouldn't easily come across in ServiceNow. So we had to come up with some, kind of one-off solutions that would get us closest to where we could get. But we decided early on, DB was going to be the master data source for, contact, entity, all of that kind of information that would then be used in ticketing. And then we just keep it up to date. I think we load probably contacts on the hour and then the rest of the data nightly. So DB is our primary data source for that information, whereas ticketing is our primary data source for ticketing information, really only, not for the contacts and the members.
Contracts on the hour, that's impressive.
You know how the churn is. People come, people go, same day.
So Dave or Doug, I don't know if you guys would mind talking about kind of how you guys are going about deciding between Salesforce and Dynamics, and what are some of the factors that you're considering?
I have an admitted bias in the house that Doug knows well, which is I'm leaning towards Microsoft because of all of the work that we've done with Microsoft to date. We were an early user of Planner, we're a user of Teams, and we just have more familiarity. And the truth is, we also have some decent opportunities from a partnership perspective locally for integration. And I do see that architectural migration of doing things like we might do, the sort of simple Dynamics input and then use the Power BI tools or Power Automate to actually put the Legos together to do like the workflows that I talked about, like going from opportunity to a provisioning ticket, right? Something like that, right? So that's, that we have not made any final decisions. Like I said, the guy, our friends at OneNet kind of threw us a curve and showing us such a great demo with the stuff they did with Salesforce integration. So that it raises a use case that's actually really wonderful. And one of the more complex business things that we need to deal with is E-rate, and integrating E-rate workflows with E-rate databases and things like that is a real challenge. And something that it's cool that we have brethren that have already done it out there, in Oklahoma. But that being said, I do have a little bit more comfort, and maybe this is not scientific, but with the Microsoft Dynamics look right now, that's not like a spreadsheet evaluation of the pros and cons of either one. I also think Salesforce, if we were the more, let's say, traditional sales organization where we're, forecasting and percent to close and opportunity opens up, all of the marketing kind of things. If we could leverage, I think, if we were really going to go down that road, I think Salesforce might win the day. But we're not that kind of organization right now.
I can definitely relate to that. I mean, you've already invested a lot of time and effort to setting up everything that you set up, then to make the switch is going to be difficult. But
yeah,
this has been a good conversation for me too, because I hadn't even thought about the E-rate piece of it and integrating that. And we do so much with, with our members with responding to E-rate, and it takes so much time. So that's definitely worth looking into.
They did a very cool at OneNet. You should talk to them about their integration. It's really neat.
Brian, I might be contacting you. I might be contacting Brian about a demo for the user group at some point. It seems like this E-rate connection sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really not. There's no magic to it. You could do this. What we did in really any system. We take the authoritative. They've got a what's it called, a 471, and we take those records and just import them into our database and work off of those records. And you could do that in Microsoft's tools or really anything that will let you import data.
Yeah, and I believe there's been other RDs that have done that too in the past. At quilt meetings, I remember somebody presenting where they had and did something similar with importing the E-rate data and putting it into their system. I can't remember who it was now.
Yeah, I think the big thing for us was we just went all in on one platform for that whole process. So we built the automation in Salesforce to do, generating quote requests for the partners that we work with, and when we get it back in, it can calculate the costs and all that kind of stuff. But that could be done really in any platform.
So I don't know, like maybe another question is, so there's been a lot of focus on Salesforce, but are there other CRMs or just other systems in general that people have wanted to or attempted to create integrations?
When I pulled the quilt, NetSuite was the other one that popped up.
I'm looking at the time here, by the way, which is why I'm asking this question.
I would say in addition to the Salesforce-y kinds of things, asset management is a big one. I can speak for Internet too, but they have their own system to manage all that. And every time we have to reconcile the two, it becomes a difficult game. There are things like that they put in there, like depreciation, and we've put a lot of that support for that in the GlobalNOC DB, but Internet 2 wants to keep that information in-house and restricted. So like having some integration there is good. The serial numbers tend to work well, but not perfectly.
I saw Brian smiling because I know that they do something similar over at OneNet.
Well, we try and we throw our hands up and say, man, we got to get this figured out. And then we try again, and Yeah, especially when we forget to let the fixed asset people know that we did an RMA.
I was just going to say RMA is the hardest one too. Yep, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, that's one of those things that it's really easy to like to do a whole bunch of things, get the database up to date, and then like a week later it's out of date now, and you've got to like do that all over again.
So in full disclosure, that's one that we're kind of after here too, because we have multiple authoritative sources for this stuff, right? With our affiliation, obviously just for running the network itself and the assets that are there. And then if you can imagine, we're also part of a university and the state that have assets in their respective systems of record. And we spend so much administrative time chasing down a device that's worth like $2,500. I want it to go away. I don't know what it looks like yet, but oh my goodness, the amount of overhead with tracking minutia in some cases is just astounding. And for now, it's all manual, as probably most may be.
Is there an issue with using the ServiceNow element of asset management because we're using the DB as opposed to their DB? Or do you
just synchronizing them?
So if you wanted to use their functionality for asset management is what I'm saying.
Asset management. I don't think we're probably licensed for that with ITSM. Like
Okay.
I think we have licensing for CMDB, but kind of unwinding that. Like we've loaded nodes, we've loaded some of the data there, but certainly not all of it.
That is something that maybe we can look into and understand more if it is included or
Yeah,
what it would
we
take.
can definitely find out.
Yeah,
By
sometimes
default, it's not, unless you guys already negotiated, right? So it's ServiceNow has grown into this huge
monolith
thing with many modules.
Very many.
Yeah, unless you licensed it, it's not there, and it's yet another menu price to go license and figure out your headcounts and all that stuff.
And it's like typically $20 per license or something crazy like that. Like it's not $20 a month per license.
Yeah, I was kind of inquiring if you even wanted to go that route. Would it be another step because we're not using their native DB?
Right. I don't think we know the answer to that, but like Brian said, we have done some imports into the CMDB from GlobalNOC DB, and that's something that we could enhance if we needed to.
Interesting.
Okay, I hate to kill off the conversation. I know we've been going pretty strong, and we appreciate all the input. This was a really good talk. It's good to hear what you guys are doing. It seems like there's a lot of consistencies across some of that, but we're out of time here. So we're gonna take a little bit of a longer break here. Allow people in different time zones to get some food, get things going. And we're gonna come back around 2:05 to talk about customer portals. We've got some nice talks lined up in that, and so we'll see you guys all around 2:05. And I'll leave the bridge up if you want to keep talking. You're welcome to keep chatting about CRM.
It actually was a good session. I came up with some ideas. David mentioned some things about like their peering with their scrubbing service, not knowing what addresses those are, and that comes playing with RPKI here in the future too, of getting people's routes into the database, so you can do some other fancy things like automatically update the IR records and things like that.
Yeah, you'd have to integrate that to somehow dynamically update the records or tie into whatever your core DNS is, right? Or IPAM solution, I'll say,
yeah.
If you have one.
Are most folks not using the GlobalNOC IP address management stuff that's in the database?
I don't think we are. We do with all that in Infoblox as our IPAM solution.
Okay.
It would be nice if it were in sync, because I ask the same questions 9 times, again and again, like, who is this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually would help you a lot. It's not too bad. We've done a lot of I think some enhancements to it recently where you can do multiple Like if you're doing overlapping non-routables, that's allowed now. And a few other things, so you can pretty much find out whose address is for what routed instance or things like that if you need to when it comes up.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like most things that we would want to do is if we're going to consider the GlobalNOC database as authoritative, is just make it that way and push other. But in some cases, I mean, this is pull because the primary management is in another system. But then we got to normalize all the names, all that stuff. So that's a whole nother endeavor I didn't even think about. You just gave me another project wish list.
One of the things, the common themes we'll hear the rest of the day is data normalization, making it so that everything matches up.
Unfortunately, it's so manual to get it right. And then before you do any inputs, and there's, hundreds and hundreds of these lines of just, making sure this is the right entity, and then all the other metadata associated with it to push or pull, some other direction.
Yeah, this is why corporate entities have, teams that just do data collection and input and, support and making sure things are up to date.
Yeah, right. Well, we have each other. What's up, Lance? Can't hear you, buddy.
How about that?
There we go.
Hey, Ryan. Thank you for helping me out there, buddy. I appreciate you. Along that similar lines of thought, one of the more recent conversations, and I say recent, has been going on for like 5 years here in Louisiana, is there seems to be a push of institutions moving towards, I use the term loosely, standardized platforms for their ERPs. More specifically here, the push is Workday. And just because of the concept behind everybody getting, being on the same version, everybody getting the same updates, but at the end of the day, data normalization is part of that conversation, right? Because there is an attempt and deliberate attempt to move away from the customization side. So one of the things that I think about as our engagement with GlobalNOC is going is there's a ton of customization on the database side, and is that sustainable for GlobalNOC? I'm thinking 10, 20 years down the road, where are we going to find ourselves together in this together? What do we know that we don't know yet, or what do we don't know that we should be knowing yet? It's something I have been thinking about, because I think we're going to find ourselves at some point where we're going to be collectively working together to figure out, well, how do we get over whatever this big hurdle is that we're not forecasting.
Yeah, customization versus standardization is something we talk about a lot here. And we control it as much as we can, but you can't control it all the way, right? Like, we don't ever fork our software and have one client run one fork and another run another. Everybody runs the same version of the database. But it keeps getting bigger over time, and we've got to be careful about pruning out old stuff and when we add new features, figuring out how they fit in with the old features and make sure we're not adding new cruft. And a big complex system like that's something you always got to be thinking about.
Yeah, but in a way, it's fair to say that you guys are our Workday, and we're relying on you to do those things. So that way, quite frankly, the customizations that we may do internally are not going to ripple over to Lonnie or somebody else or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's this is a great point, and I certainly agree. One of the things that we struggle with is that there are occasionally people. One network wants to do something one way, another network wants to do it another way, and how do we reconcile those within a single tool set and trying to avoid conflicts and we try really hard not to be prescriptive, in general, because that can be, we've all used software tools where it's sort of some people won't like this, but the canonical example historically has been Apple, where you do it their way, and if it's not working out for you, then the problem is with you, the user, not with the software. But what I was going to say is, we talked about fair and transparent prioritization, and something that we just touched on very briefly yesterday was, the idea of giving some kind of visibility for one customer into another customer's tickets, and the requests that they've made and the things that they want to have prioritized. And I know that that's something that's been on my mind. Are there ways that we can reasonably manage that kind of visibility and give you as the customer sufficient control that you're comfortable with that? Because that may potentially provide a framework for having some of these kinds of conversations, like coming up with more standardized or at least less divergent ways of solving particular problems. So like if there are that's something that we try to watch out for internally, but if it's something where you can participate in that more directly, so it's like, okay, CM can see that, hey, Loney are asking for like a particular way of, I don't know, some particular like data structure in the DB, and that's something that seems like a good idea to them. Then, so the point is that the fair and transparent prioritization, if we can figure out ways to make that reasonably like cross-customer, then that may provide an avenue for some of these kinds of conversations and figuring out some of these kinds of questions.
One of the things I'll mention is the lack of customization is actually why the GlobalNOC doesn't use Salesforce. We used to use Salesforce for a little bit for our internal tracking of new leads and things like that. And then we were in a similar boat to Lonnie, and that IU took over Salesforce of everybody on campus. Everybody kind of had their own disparate thing, and they centralized it, and they took away a lot of our customizations and our ability to build something. So it just became basically unusable for us. And so we only actually use Salesforce to send out emails. So all those emails you guys get from ITCO are the ones that come through Salesforce. As a kind of general question, do you like Workday?
That's a good question. I will say that bad business practices don't fix themselves with bad implementations of those bad business practices. And I'll stop there.
Enough said. Enough said. Everybody got it.
Wow. Tell us how you really feel.
I'm sure Workday is a very meaningful tool in some places.
One of the things that my team was looking for at one point was just like a workflow type management of our, like, how do we keep track of these things, and then how do we report on them? On our stuff, a lot of it is not in ServiceNow. We're in a similar boat to Wendy's team and to some of the other member services teams, and that we don't use ServiceNow a lot. And so we're trying to figure out how we could maybe report on some of our projects, or do some sort of like long-term planning. We ended up using Excel, in case anyone's curious, and just creating some stuff in Excel, but we looked at a lot of different tools for that.